Okay, we're here at the 2015 Tucson Festival of Books, and we have a group of students from Glowing Wells High School that are interviewing the author Jen Nielsen.
I'm Itzel Herrera, and the first question I have for you is, so the main character Sage is defiant and witty. From who, if anyone, did you take inspiration from and why?
Sage is very much his own character. He's very unique, but I will tell you there's one trait of his I did borrow from an actual person. I used to be a high school debate coach, and every weekend we would go get on the bus and go to a tournament. One of my debaters was a student named Ken, and Ken was good looking and brilliant and very popular, but Ken was a thief. And we would get on the bus, and Ken would go up to the bus driver and offer to shake their hand and just thank you for driving us today. And while he's shaking the bus driver's hand, he is stealing the watch right off the bus driver's wrist. And he would take that watch and go to the back of the bus with it, and then he would hold it for the whole bus ride. And then at the end of the ride, he would come back to the front of the bus with that watch in hand, and he would say to the bus driver, "Hey, I found this on the floor of the bus. Is there any chance it's yours?" And the bus driver would be like, "Oh, it's so nice to have honest young men these days," when Ken was the guy who had taken it. And he got the biggest rush. He didn't want the stuff. He just wanted to know he could steal it. So when it was time to write Sage, he's very much his own character. But in writing his thief scenes, I always thought about Ken.
So my second question is, in the book, the governmental system seems flawed. Do you see any flaws in our system?
Every system is flawed. I mean, there's no system that is perfect. And of course, our the American system has its flaws in it, but I will tell you this, if you study the history of the world and a history of governments, there is no government system that has produced the wealth and the success and the prosperity amongst so many people as has our government. So even though it is not perfect, I would choose this system of representation and freedom over any place on the planet.
So I'm Anna Roca, and my first question is, what do you want the readers to get out of this book?
Out of The False Prince?
Yes.
I think empowerment. I think I would love for readers to understand, to be who you are. And who you are doesn't have to be acceptable to other people in authority or your peers or anybody else. You have to stay true to the person you are, because the person you are is your strongest possible self. And if you try to imitate somebody else, you are just a fake imitation of somebody else, because there's only one authentic you, and you stay loyal to that person.
My second question is, when did you start developing your writing skills?
The first time I really thought about writing was 6th grade, and it was an epic fail. And I was so bad at it that I thought I was never meant to be a writer, because I kind of had this idea that if you are meant to be a writer, you should be born really good at writing. And it took me a long time to realize that it's something I could make of myself, not something that I had to be right away. And so I was in my 20s before I really took my writing seriously. And before that, I just thought, no, it must be somebody else, special person, who can become a writer, because not me.
What is some advice you would like to give to new writers, or that they don't exactly know where to start?
For a new writer, somebody who thinks they might want to become an author someday, but they don't really know where to start, here's what I would advise. I would say get your very favorite book, the book that you think about, the book that you reread, the book that you are recommending to all of your friends. Get a copy that you're going to kind of destroy. It's not your reading copy. Get one, and then take highlighters and pens and highlight everything you love. Every single thing that you're like, that was awesome. And then look at that section and say, what did this author do right? How did my favorite author handle character? How did they handle, that growing tension? How did they handle dialogue? Because once you understand why your favorite author made it work, you will know what you want to bring into your own writing. That's my advice.
My name is Paola Ortez, and my first question is, which character reminds you the most of yourself when you were younger?
When I was younger, Young me would have been a lot like Sage. I was definitely a climber. I had a near-death experience on the monkey bars because I'm going to just tell you as a fact, no, you are not supposed to do handstands on the top of monkey bars. I was a tree climber, and I didn't understand about electrical, like the wires that ran through the trees. I didn't know that was a thing until one significant day, and so I was always climbing things, and I've always been a little bit reckless. I mean now I'm an adult. I grew out of most of that, and I was always one to push the rules. My dad is the same way. My dad is like, if this is the edge of the cliff, that you're driving on, what if you put half your tire over the cliff? And I'm not that crazy, but he taught me to always push and push and push. And so young me would have been very much like Sage.
My second question is more like book specific, and it's when Connor asks Sage to be his prince, why does Sage refuse? He's like, yes, I want, I am your prince and stuff, but then he goes back and he's like, no, I don't really, I can't become him, but...
Yeah, Connor is pushing what Sage understands. What Connor wants is control of Sage. He wants control, and so when Connor is saying, will you be my prince, that is a different question than will you be the prince. And when Sage is, after he's been whipped and he is all that time down in the dungeons on his own, he has to work out the question. And Sage, is very crafty about specific words. And so what Sage comes to is, yes, I will be Connor's prince, but I will be Carthia's king. And so that's how he kind of resolves it in his head. And finally at the end, when he tells Connor, yes, I am your prince, he is. He does everything Connor tells him to do. But then he remains Carthia's king, and that is more important than Connor's prince. Yeah.
My name's Alma Camus. What prompted you to write from a historical focus?
Just because I'm kind of a history geek. I'm not kind of. I'm a big history geek. I love history. I love that all of the best stories that the world has ever heard actually happened in history. And you think about how many authors base their works in history that we may not realize are historical. J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, the whole mudblood and cleanse the wizarding world of mudbloods, that's Nazi Germany. Suzanne Collins, she writes The Hunger Games, all right, where she has tributes going into an arena surrounded by all of these people to look for the victor who gets all of these rewards, and they have to kill each other to do it. Suzanne Collins is writing the gladiators of ancient Rome, all right? Divergent, where they have factions who are competing, that's the chariot races of Rome. And so as writers, the more that we understand history, the more that we understand exactly how to flavor our books. I just happen to set my books in history because I love the richness and wealth of that time period.
So if this book was written for one person, who would it be?
Me? All of my books are for me, first and foremost. I write the book that I want to read. And so I have a pretty short attention span in books. And so every time somebody's getting killed or beat up or stabbed or whatever, that's just because I was bored. And I was like, God, I really feel like somebody needs to die right about now. And it's just me entertaining myself. And because as a writer, if you're writing to please somebody else and make somebody else happy, you're just chasing something you will never catch. You only write to please yourself, and then you hope there are other people in the world who like the same sort of thing that you like too. That's all you ever write to.
What has been the most rewarding experience about writing The False Prince?
The most rewarding experience, about once a month, I will get an email from somebody, a kid who will say, I hated reading until your book. I hated reading, and I love that. I have had some experiences that are full of more details about these books saving lives and saving relationships and getting people focused again on who they really want to be. In the very real world, books change lives. They change lives, and to get to be a part of that, there is no reward greater than knowing you had an impact on somebody's life.
So on that, what book would you say had an impact on your life?
The book that had an impact on my life the most was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. That is the #1 most selling YA book at the time. And in 6th grade, I loved that book. I would read it on a loop where I would just get to the end and then right back to chapter 1 again. I read it over and over and over again. S.E. Hinton is the first author I became interested in, and I realized she wrote that book as a teenager. S.E. Hinton is the first person who made me understand that in order to become an author, you don't have to be like some super special person. You don't have to live in some special place in the world or have some super special intelligence. She's the person who told me through her writing, you can be an ordinary person living an ordinary life and grow up to make your dreams come true.
So there's 3 books to this one, right?
Uh-huh.
So the second book, I haven't read it yet, but I want to know kind of what it's about.
Okay, so the first book, The False Prince, involves, the journey to figure out who is going to be sitting on the throne of Carthia. Book 2, The Runaway King, is the consequences of coming to the throne. And for Sage's involvement in the book, whatever I do to that poor kid in book 1, I do it worse. I am meaner in book 2. It is. I beat the heck out of that kid, but all for entertainment, because we authors are all sadists. And book 2 kind of says, if we don't fix the problem in this kingdom, there could be a war. Book 3, The Shadow Throne, that is the war that comes. So that is the king having to fight that war.
Does Connor go in the second book at all?
Connor is in the second book, and he is he has a pretty small role, but you will see Connor in book 2, and then you'll see him back again in book 3, because Connor is such a great villain. He kind of deals in the world of gray. He's certainly not purely good, but he's not purely bad either. He's in this mixed world, and you really get to figure out where he stands in book 3.
What happens to the other orphans like Tobias and Ronan?
All right, so you will find out more about them at the end of The False Prince. Obviously, there's been a betrayal by one of the orphans, and there's a question of what Sage is going to do with that relationship. I will tell you that there is an assassination attempt right at the beginning of Runaway King, and it's Roden. It's Roden. He has come back to kill him, to kill Sage. Tobias has his own journey to go on as you deal with, is Tobias going to remain loyal to Sage throughout the books? And there comes kind of a crisis in book 3 where Tobias may be the one who ends up betraying him, and how Sage deals with that. So every one of those orphans has to go on his journey too.
Well, thank you very much for coming and allowing us to interview you. It's quite a pleasure for us.
Well, it's an honor to be interviewed, and you can't see the ladies because it's, not that kind of an interview. They're all gorgeous. Every one of them.